From the 17th and 19th century, a new domestic prototype sprung from 2 centuries of development. Called the Bahay na Bato, this house form merged the features of indigenous and Hispanic building traditions. The Bahay na Bato was also the outcome of profound social change following the ascendancy of the native aristocracy, or ilustrados, who demanded a new kind of dwelling that expressed their wealth, cultural attainment, social status, and even European pretensions. The Bahay na Bato descended from the Bahay Kubo and resembled the arquitectura mestiza of the 17th century. These houses were typically 2 stories with a ground floor made of massive cut stone or brick walls, and the upper level built of hardwood. Grillwork protected the ground floor windows, while second-story windows were broad with sliding capiz shutters or glass panel. Beneath the pasamano or windowsill were auxiliary windows called ventanillas, or small windows, protected with iron grills or wooden barandillas, balusters, and had sliding wooden shutters. The house was capped by a hip or gabled tiled roof with a steep slope reaching a 45-degree angle to repel rain and oust warm air within. Roof tiles were set in 3 or more layers, which added a considerable weight to the structure. Since they could easily displace and fall apart during earthquakes, hierro or galvanized iron sheets took their place beginning in the 1880s. The hardwood post, at times unprocessed, carried the weight of the roof system. The thick masonry was merely a skirt concealing the wooden legs in the ground floor. Resonating the spatial concept of the Bahay Kubo, the living quarters were found at the upper floor, while the dark ground floor vestibule, known as saguan, was reserved for storage, and where the staircase leading to the upper floor could be found. A wooden staircase, or escalera, with 2 landings led to the upper floor and directly onto the interior overhanging veranda. As one ascended this staircase, the visitor waited to be received at the caída, or antesala. It was a most immediate room from the stair and functioned as a foyer leading to the sala, or living room. At one end of the room was the comedor, or dining room, which led to the cocina, or kitchen, with its distinctive banguera. The kitchen was sometimes built separately from the house, but was linked to the house by a walkway. Adjacent to the kitchen was the baño, or paliguan, or bathroom, and latrina, toilet. The batalan of the Bahay Kubo metamorphosed into the azotea, an outdoor terrace where the residents and their guests usually relaxed. At times, the azotea was used for food preparation and laundry activities, as it was located either beside a balon, or well, or over an aljibe, cistern. The cuarto, or bedrooms, opened into the spacious living area. room partitions did not reach the ceiling, ending instead in calados, or fretwork that enhanced cross-ventilation inside the house. With the wide doors leading to the rooms open on most occasions, the house virtually had the essence of being one space. The Bahay na Bato had several regional mutations. In the Ilocos region, especially Vigan, walls on both stories were of plastered brick embedded with a wooden frame. Exteriors had undecorated pilasters and simple continuous cornices. In Mindanao and Sulu archipelago, where Spanish influence was minimal, stone houses developed artistic features more reflective of local aesthetic traditions. By the last quarter of the 19th century, Manila experienced an urban sprawl that spilled over the walls into the various arrabales of Binondo, San Nicolas, Santa Ana, San Miguel, Paco, Ermita, and Malate. Moreover, the installation of the railway facilitated the unimpeded influx of labor force from the nearby provinces to partake in Manila's industrial progress. The accessoria, or apartment dwellings, answered the migrant laborers' need for cheap housing in commercial and industrial areas. The sparsely decorated accessorias were single or 2 stories high, having multiple units, each defined by a common party wall, shared with the adjoining unit, and by a separate door or access at the facade. Civic architecture such as the Palacio Real, the Ayuntamiento, and the Aduana epitomized the Spanish administrative institutions. The Casa del Ayuntamiento, the seat of colonial power, occupied the entire block of one of the sides of the Plaza Mayor of Manila. Across the Ayuntamiento was the residence of the highest official of the land, the Palacio del Gobernador General, or Palacio Real. On the 2nd floor was the residence of the Governor General and his family. Renaissance architecture inspired the Ayuntamiento and Palacio, which had spacious inner courts. The Palacio was toppled in the earthquake of 1863, prompting the transfer of the Governor General's royal residence to Malacañang Palace, formerly a vacation house of the governor along the Pasig River. Smaller versions of the Ayuntamiento were built in towns all over the country, called municipios, Casa Municipal, or Casa Real. As symbol of secular power, it was placed at one end of the town plaza, opposite the church, the symbol of religious power. The Casa Real did not represent a special type of architecture. Emanating from a common Bahay na Bato archetype, civic buildings were architecturally indistinguishable from one another. The missionary tasks of bringing education, healthcare, and social welfare to the indigenous subjects were undertaken by the various religious orders. Permanent buildings were generally constructed based on the atrium scheme, usually a structure or cluster of buildings in rectangular configuration with a central courtyard extending the full height or several stories of a building. The Spaniards built ports, roads, bridges, lighthouses, waterways, piped water system, railway and streetcar system, employing the leading technology available at that time. In 1892, the 192-kilometer locomotive-driven railroad system between Manila and Dagupan was opened. The most outstanding works carried out on the railway system were the bridge over Pampanga River and the Tutuban Station, designed by Juan Hervas. Every estación de ferrocarril, or railway station, was built of brick masonry and concourse following the British design. Puente de España, erected in 1875 over the Pasig River, was an outstanding example of Spanish bridge engineering. It had 8 arches. The 2 central arches were built of iron trusses, and the other 6 were of quarried stone. A suspension bridge, the Puente Colgante, consisted of a tall concrete pier. Strands of cables attached to their piers were slung across the river, which in turn carried a steel trussed bridge. Farolas, or lighthouses, were built to guide maritime traffic approaching the coast. A lighthouse consisted of a high tower on whose topmost story, walled by plate glass, was a light or beacon. The tower usually tapered at the top and could be polygon in plan or a cylinder. The oldest lighthouse was built in 1642 at the mouth of the Pasig. The Pasig Farola was a complex composed of tower, pavilion, and service buildings. Commercial buildings during the Spanish colonial era varied from small sidewalk stalls to huge factories. In large municipalities such as Manila, Cebu, Vigan, and Malolos, a special commercial district for Chinese merchants and traders were called the Parian. The very first large commercial structure was probably the Alcaiteria de San Fernando, a silk market established in 1758 in the Chinese district of Binondo. The Alcaiteria was notable for its octagonal plan, a design which had no precedent in Spanish colonial architecture. In the 19th century, the colonial administration initiated an infrastructure network for manufacturing and export. The almacén, or warehouses, fábrica, or factories, and camarín, or storehouses. Erected in 1894, the La Insular Cigar Factory was a rare example of Mudéjar-inspired industrial architecture. With the influx of European commercial houses in 1809, the Bahay na Bato on Escolta and adjacent streets were retrofitted. Here the ground floor was occupied by offices and shops, while the upper story functioned as the residence of the proprietor of the company. Ample space at the upper floor was devoted for keeping stocks. The houses of Rosario and Escolta in Binondo played host to a contiguous line of business establishments. It was also in this period that the ubiquitous neighborhood retail institution, the sari-sari store, and ready-to-eat restaurant sheds, or carinderia, came into being. The colonial amusement and public diversions were few and often dominated by theater, cockfighting, and horse racing. Teatro was a structure designed specifically for theatrical, dance, and musical performances. The earliest theaters in the Philippines were known as teatros al aire libre, or open-air theaters, which were made up of a temporary podium surrounded by an open space for spectators. Teatro de Binondo was a two-story building of stone, brick, and wood, with an arcaded first story and an open colonnaded and balustraded balcony on the second level. The Teatro Circo Zorilla had a circular hall accommodating more than 1,000 spectators. The persistence of cockfighting led to the regulation of the game and building of cockfighting arenas, or sabungan. Illegitimate forms of leisure also persisted in the urban precincts and were fitted into existing bahay na bato. Opium den, or fumadero de opio, consisted of rooms provided with benches and mats for the smokers to lie on. The legacy of Spanish colonialism gave the Filipinos a trove of built forms and architectures. The reworking of the indigenous space through the technologies of Hispanic urbanism and architecture empowered the colonizer to infuse the colonized society with new concepts of space, new forms of identity, new power relations, and new ways of orchestrating the everyday colonial experience. Lasting for 333 years, the Spanish colonial rule came to an abrupt end at the turn of the 19th century. With Spain's defeat in the Spanish-American War, a new era dawned.